Welcome to the Practice Podcast, a show created by lawyers to help lawyers in life and business without all the complicated lawyer language. Let's welcome Bast Amron founders and your hosts, Jeff Bast and Brett Amron.
Today we have a special guest, Mr. D. Porpoise Evans. Porpoise is a partner at the Weiss Serota firm in the firm's labor and employment and litigation division. His practice focuses on the representation of public and private companies in connection with employment matters. He does government investigations and legal disputes, litigation. I'm proud to say he's also our lawyer. He's the employment and labor and employment law firm lawyer for our firm. Clients look to Porpoise for his ability to find creative solutions. He's a risk minimizer. And if you're a business owner and you're not working with a labor and employment lawyer, I recommend Porpoise. Welcome, Porpoise.
Oh, thank you for that intro.
Welcome, Porpoise.
Good morning.
So I would say before this, I've learned so much already today. So I look forward to our listeners learning more too. I thought Porpoise was super interesting for the work he did and who I know him to be. And now I think he's even more interesting. So I want to get into the background and let's talk about that because I think our listeners would really love to hear about that.
Okay. How far back do you want to go?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. How far back do we need to go? Where do we start, Porpoise? Do you want to start?
Where were you born?
Where were you born?
Let's get that
right.
I come from the mean streets of Louisville, Kentucky.
Right.
Okay.
Born in
so
Kentucky.
Let's start peeling back the onion. All right. Louisville, Kentucky.
18
and then
years of my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Born and raised. Louisville, Kentucky. Okay.
Ran away as soon as I could.
Okay. And then to
Providence, Rhode Island for college.
Mm-hmm.
Brown University. And you left Brown in 1996.
Don't date the guy.
Do you want to?
No, I'm a child of the 70s and 80s.
Because you left Brown in 94, but when I look on your website, it says you graduated from Brown in 1999.
Sure. I was on the 11-year plan.
Gap?
Yeah.
Right.
You're on the 11-year plan.
There were a lot of, I expect that at University of Florida, where I knew a lot of, I'm sure you did too, a lot of people on the 11-year plan, but maybe not at Brown.
No, I started in 88 and I was on a pre-med track. And by 1990, I knew that I had no interest in becoming a doctor. That's actually why I chose Brown over Yale, was because they had a really cool program in liberal medical education, which allowed me to get off the train early enough before I was trapped. Took a year off school. And when I came back to school, they were asking me for a couple more credits than I had. And I left town 1 credit short of graduating in 1994 and thought I would take my talents to South Beach.
So you ended up coming down here.
Came down here.
How did you come? Why here?
I came here with a woman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No better reason.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So you come down to South Florida and...
Right to law school.
Not at all.
No?
Right.
I had no idea that I'd be an attorney one day.
Okay.
I didn't know any attorneys. Was never on a pre-law track. I was in the film business. I waited tables. I just wanted to be here in the sunshine, away from the cold.
You were in the film business in Miami?
In the film business, on the back side of the camera, the prop world. Actually, 2 things I did. I had a company called Film Trash, where we picked up garbage off film sets anytime they were filming on location.
So you were a garbage man before you became a lawyer, right? Okay.
Garbage man to the stars.
Might have been
can
you
the
explain
stars.
That? Film trash.
The extras.
What that is?
The extras, right? Yeah.
You picked up trash on film sets?
That's right.
Well, you built a business, right?
We did. It was enough to put food on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this was in the 90s, so there was a lot of production in Miami at the time.
That's right. Miami Vice, I think, ended, I don't know, maybe in the late 80s, but there was an industry here, and everybody wanted to shoot here. You had a lot of blockbusters, a lot of flops as well. Some of the things I worked on were Fair Game, Bad Boys, True Lies. What was the one with
Ventura?
No. I had a lot of friends that worked on
I know it was. That's why I asked.
Bad Boys was filmed in my neighborhood. Most of it, the house was in my neighborhood.
Yeah. So
Jeff got a credit if you look at the end.
Yeah.
In Bad Boys or Ace Ventura?
No, at the end. Yeah. Yes. That was Jeff's.
I get no credit.
Neighborhood.
Story of my life, no credit.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you built this business, right? Film Trash.
Right. I had dreams of selling it to Wayne Huizinga, but it was not that kind of business.
He owned Waste Management.
Yeah,
that's right.
Time,
right? Okay. Yeah, owned the Dolphins, Waste Management. I thought that maybe that's what we'd build it into, but we didn't. We just kind of let it go. I looked around. I had no role models. I said, what am I going to be when I grow up? Let's think about this. And I said, well, law school might be an option. I was working on a job up in New York for Target and decided to take the LSAT, took it, and scored well enough to have some schools interested in me.
Okay.
And so the rest is history.
Yeah. The rest is history, right?
Did you go and you worked at a big firm at Greenberg Traurig, right? Is that straight out of law school?
No, straight out. I worked at McDermott, Will & Emery.
Okay.
Another big firm.
So a couple of big firms under your belt for good, first 10 years of your career?
10, 12 years, yeah.
And now you're at Weiss Serota.
I am. I had a little pit stop at Perlman behind us, Yavoli and Albright, a 20 lawyer shop. So it's a big change from Greenberg Traurig, 2,500 lawyers down to 20. But I did that. I made that move.
Yeah. You want to talk about that change? How did you find it? Was that a difficult adjustment for you going from big to small, or?
It was a huge adjustment, but I wouldn't call it difficult. It was somewhat seamless. And I mean, I left Greenberg in large part because it wasn't a good fit for a country boy like me. I didn't have a single client when I left. I thought perhaps the days of the service partner were numbered. Mm-hmm. So I decided if I was going to move, I think I was 40 at that point, maybe a little older. I said, it's time to chart my own path.
Right. And I think when you say that, the fit, I don't think you're speaking specifically about Greenberg, but more big firm for us in a small city.
Yeah. No, Greenberg. I was at Greenberg for over 10 years, and I never thought that I was cut out for a big firm. But I got to say, I'm very grateful for that time there.
Yeah. Did you jump right to employment law, or did you meander around a little bit in different areas until you found something that kind of stuck?
Yeah, I started out as a general commercial litigator, doing a lot of securities litigation, broker-dealer defense when I was at GT, but there was a quirky group of guys who were always working late with me. There was this guy, Mark Schnapp, and Steve Benhack, and Joe Fleming, and they were always doing some interesting stuff, like creative thinking and monkeying around. And Mark got me involved in FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices work. Joe Fleming got me involved in speaking about labor and employment. And this is back in like 2005, 2006. So before I was even practicing it, he was like, I want you to learn this stuff because I want to put you on some speaking engagements and help me write about it. And I loved it. And then between the stuff that those two guys were doing, I thought, this is a lot more suited to me than financial stuff.
Do you still do FCPA, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act stuff?
I do, yeah, yeah.
And that's on...
And it dovetails really well with my labor and employment practice.
Can you explain for our listeners what FCPA, what does that mean? When you practice in the Foreign Practices Act, what does that mean? What does that entail?
It sounds really, I guess, sophisticated because of all the alphabet soup, but it basically means you shouldn't bribe public officials to get business.
Wait. Maybe you haven't told us that before.
Well, you're not doing any business abroad. So you can do it here. It's called lobbying. Oh, okay. But when you do it in a foreign country, it's called bribery.
I'm going to remain silent.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you're giving advice to companies who working abroad and maybe susceptible to those types of...
broadly applicable, right? And you've got dual jurisdiction between the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission. And it's a cash cow for the U.S. government, basically. So anybody who has a manufacturing facility or JV or is bidding on a job with a foreign government is potentially subject to it. And the people say, well, what's that got to do with labor and employment? And I tell them, who gets a company in trouble?
Employees.
Employees, right? Which is everybody working for you.
Right,
whether it's a low-level manager or an executive.
Right.
What do? They harass their subordinates. And they try to pay bribes to get business. And those are two big risk areas that I help write policies about, help train employees about, and defend if the government steps in.
So are you asked to come in, obviously, before there's any issues, right? So do you help companies or law firms or companies with employment manuals, like I think you said, with training for employees, things like that?
Yeah, it's kind of a life cycle. If you do it right, if you're a responsible business owner, you're thinking about these things all the time and you have your policies in place. You train your employees on those policies. You hope that nobody runs afoul of the policies, but if they do or if they get accused of it, then you either have an employee who's suing the company or you have a government who's investigating and potentially bringing a suit or bringing down the sanctions hammer.
So I would imagine that you have got your phone's got to be ringing off the hook. It has been over the last couple of years with all of that, with the policies and people working remotely. And
the world just is upside down and has been for going on 3 years now, right? No, 2 years.
Would you say, before we get into that, would you say that in your experience, do most companies have the employment policies that should be in place, like a procedures manual? And
it's a mixed bag.
Yeah,
you've got some companies that have put a lot of thought into it, and when I say company, I could be talking about a company that's worldwide or a local business with 5 employees. But some of them have really tried to get their ducks in a row. Some of them have a payroll company, an ADP or something like that, PEO maybe, where they have pulled something off the shelf and slotted it in and haven't thought about it in years. Then there's some that are just completely naked and have no handbook.
But I would suspect that the ones that are naked stay that way until they get sued or a threat of a suit. Right?
Or they have a question. They have an employee who's complaining about something, and oftentimes the question I have for them is, what's your handbook say? You're legally entitled to do it unless your handbook says that you're going to do it in a different way, which a lot of them do, unbeknownst to the owners of the company.
Right. So they have it. And would you say that it's better, because you mentioned the sort of off-the-shelf manual, would you say that's better than no manual? It's a tough question. I recognize it's a hard question.
It depends, as we like to say, right? Because I see a lot of things that are the proverbial square peg in the round hole.
Right.
And they just don't apply. Or a company has promised things to its employees. It could be vacation days or holiday days or all sorts of things that they don't know they've promised.
Right, right.
The worst handbooks are those that they've gotten from a friend, and they might have gotten them from a friend in California where they had to have a lot more protections than we need here in Florida. Florida is a good place to be if you're an employer, right?
Employer. Why is that?
We're very business friendly, whether it has to do with the fact that we have very few state laws that exceed the federal laws. I mean, our overtime is higher than federal overtime. And anybody who doesn't realize that overtime is now $10 an hour and will go up every year for the next, minimum wage for the next 5 years is behind the times. So
$10 an hour in Florida?
$10 an hour in Florida.
Right.
Yeah. Federal is still at 8 something.
Right.
That's just shocking to me.
Yeah.
It really is.
That's even, that there's a dispute about that.
Yeah.
About raising that.
Right? Yeah.
Separate, we could do a separate episode on that. But the other point, I think you were starting to say is about when you get it from your friend. Oh, you were saying about this, each state has different laws. So you have to, when you're dealing with a labor and employment or a manual, you have to follow federal regulations, state, and then even local, right? Don't some counties and cities have their own requirements?
And Miami-Dade, overlays the city of Miami or Miami Beach or Coral Gables. You have to be tuned into the various ordinances,
So how does that come into play with the fact that people are now working in different locations, right? You have an office, let's say here in Miami, and you have now people spread about either throughout the state of Florida, so you have different counties and cities, or throughout different states.
Yeah. Well, typically where the employee is working is where the employee can avail himself or herself of the protections. You're always going to have the federal law on top. You got Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So you're always going to have those protected characteristics. It's not a protected class. That's another slight misconception, but it's the characteristics that give you the protection. So you're always going to have those, but then some states might give you more protection. Or, for example, in Florida, we have a new law that the idea is to, give people more freedom over their bodies, right? And to reject vaccines.
So this is employees more
This
freedom.
is employees.
Right.
So this is the one area that I've seen where Florida is not a pro-business state.
Right, exactly.
So it's pretty ironic, but we're protecting employees against their oppressive employers, quote unquote, all of that. So there really is no federal law right now mandating vaccines. The OSHA division of the Department of Labor did have a standard that had been put in place in September, and it's been litigated in the courts. And a couple of weeks ago, the Supreme Court put it on ice. And this week, actually, I think it was on Monday, OSHA said we're taking it off the table. So that large employer rule mandating vaccines that everybody was up in arms about is gone.
So, sorry, that was for private employers. The federal is still there, although that's still being challenged.
Exactly.
Right. And health and hospital workers.
Health and hospitals is actually okay.
Still in.
Yeah, the Supreme Court said that was okay.
So but that's a little bit different too, because that really only says that you can't, if you don't have the vax mandate, then you can't get reimbursed by Medicare and Medicaid.
Right. So, but this, in a way, doesn't this make it harder for employers that have offices in multiple states? Because now they're trying to, if you have an overarching federal mandate that you're complying with, that's a single mandate. But if now they're in multiple states, they got to comply with each state, right?
Yeah, and I've got a handful of clients that are dealing with that right now. And they were really, really worried. Well, even the local clients were worried about it because the federal law for the large employers was seemed to be in direct conflict with the new Florida law. There really was a good slice down the middle where you could comply with both, as long as you were masking. I mean, it's not a mask mandate if you have the option to test, right?
Right.
So now you've got companies that have offices in different states that know they have to comply with different employment law.
Yeah, it's tough.
Right?
It's a mosaic.
But now you got to layer on the whole vaccine issue, right? But then you now have this other issue of people not going to offices, but working either from their homes or from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And now companies have to consider those issues, right? And I imagine you're kind of dealing with a bunch of that right now.
Completely. And I've been interviewing, and several associates are working remotely out of New York, New Jersey. Yeah. They're nowhere near the law firms that they're working for.
So these are attorneys that you're interviewing to potentially hire, right?
Correct.
So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the benefits is, right, your recruiting pool has expanded geographically.
And a lot of people want to be in Florida for all kinds of different reasons.
Right.
Yeah. And we can talk, actually, I have an interesting story about one of those reasons, but it's off topic. We can keep on with this. But yeah, it's difficult for the employer, but ultimately where you're working is the state law that's going to protect you.
You think you're going to get away from that? Is this something that you can discuss publicly? What your little side story? Go, please.
We can keep it
we love an
anonymous.
Interesting topic.
Yeah, well, just along the lines of the attraction of Florida, I recently got a call from a friend who had a friend in Canada, and he wants to buy a business in Florida in order to escape the oppressive, again, in quotation marks, the oppressive laws that he's living under in Montreal in order to get down to Florida and bring his family here. So he wants to actually immigrate. Every year there's a regime change. I hear folks talk about, I'm getting out of here.
Right.
This is the last straw. I have to leave. Yeah. Well, this is a guy who's actually doing it.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So he wants to be here because we're much more open to the non-vaxxed.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So then good little detour.
And he's coming to Florida?
Yeah. He's coming to Florida. He's bringing his unvaccinated family here because, because we're a free state.
You'll let us know offline where they live.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway. All right. So we're talking about labor and play. Well, let me ask a different question because Brett and I are in we're in entrepreneurs organization. So we have tons of entrepreneur friends. What would be the sort of, if you had one piece of advice to generically give to local business owners, what would it be? We're going to pass this along on your behalf.
The single biggest piece of advice that I give to people is please talk to somebody like me if you have 1099 employees.
Okay. So
because there's no such thing as a 1099 employee.
So 1099, so to explain, 1099 would be...
Yeah, 1099 is the federal tax form that you submit or that you provide to an independent contractor.
Mm-hmm.
And employees cannot be paid as independent contractors, no matter how you and the employee agree, whether you and the employee agree that it's a good thing and a good wink, wink, nod, relationship. It just causes all sorts of trouble.
Yeah. And I hear from other business owners pretty often that, how many employees do you have? Well, I have 12 employees and 16 1099s.
Yep. Exactly.
That's I've heard that quotes like that many, many times.
Yeah. I mean, there's a place.
So what's the risk there? Yeah.
There's a place for that though, right? I guess to just sort of hop on to Jeff's question. There's a place for 1099s, but what you're saying is, look, if there's somebody who looks and smells like a duck, it's a duck. It's an employee, not a 1099.
Yeah, and the problem is the regulators. One of the problems is the regulators. So you've got the Department of Labor that doesn't like it. You've got the IRS that doesn't like it. And setting aside the SEC, you've got workers' comp issues, and you don't have the same rights as an independent contractor that you have as an employee. So you can't sue for discrimination, for example. You're not entitled to overtime. You're not entitled to workers' compensation. All of those things go out the door. And so it's a recipe for abuse if you're not paying and considering your employees.
This was the whole issue for Uber.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So if a company has a series 1 or more 1099s that are individuals that are regularly working for their company, I don't know what's the standard. I guess that I know it's
there are at
draw.
least 3 multi-factor tests,
right.
And I don't think we have time to go through all of them. But
nor do we have
labor and IRS have similar but different tests, and then you got the common law test. Then you got the state tests. And California has a brand new test, the ABC test, that came out of the Uber lawsuit. So it's a mess.
Yeah.
But bottom line is, if a plumber is a traditional independent contractor, you call the plumber to come in, fix your toilet when it breaks, right?
Right.
He or she has his own business and goes and works for different law firms fixing their toilets. You might be big enough that you've got an in-house plumber that only works for you, right? So a plumber could go either way, but your traditional plumber is an independent contractor. And I try to get people to think of it that way. If you've got somebody doing your core services.
How about IT, like IT person, like someone is IT,
if you've got an IT person that only does IT and works for a bunch of different law firms, that could be an independent contractor. Probably is. That company is. But if you got one guy that does all your IT and just happens to do it from his house, but he's pretty much working full-time for you, he doesn't have any risk of entrepreneurship, then he's probably your employee.
Right. And how does this become a problem for an employer? Like, how does this arise? If they're not listening to this podcast and taking your advice to go talk to you, how are they going to hear about this?
Well, they can hear about it when the employee falls down on a pair of roller skates working from home on the way from the home office to the kitchen, and wants to file a workers' comp claim. And you say, well, okay, but I don't have insurance because you're not my employee. So good luck. I hope you have your own insurance. Similarly, become a problem when you fire the person and the person wants to leave. And they say, well, you haven't been paying me overtime for the past 2 years. I think you ought to because I really was your employee. Similar thing happens when you've misclassified a non-exempt employee. But
there are potential tax implications too. Right? Or payroll tax implications, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. So the IRS, in theory, you could get audited and they could say, hey, what are all these 1099s?
That's the bonus one of the big bonuses for an employer is not having to pay any payroll taxes.
Right.
Yeah. And it could be a surprise when the employee gets audited.
Right. And this issue comes up for one employee or one, I'm putting air quotes around the word employee, for one 1099 employee. Then the others could learn about it, and now it's an issue.
Then you end up with a collective action.
Right. Okay. Good stuff. That's
a little bit different than a class action, but but one employee could sue on behalf of all the employees.
Right. 1099.
Sure.
We're using that term. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So it seems like obviously people need to call you or somebody like you far in advance of when they actually think they need you.
If you have people working for you, it's time to start thinking about the issues that
get out in front of it. It's going to cost you a lot more in time and money if you don't.
Yeah, that's the difficulty is how does a business startup that has limited resources, how do they prioritize hiring a lawyer? They don't tend to do that until they're reacting to some problem, right? But you are one of those examples where hiring you early can avoid the problems, minimize the expense, and will cost a heck of a lot less than...
I can't tell you how many clients I've had to defend. The clients have had to defend a lawsuit and have spent, just from day one, at least 10 grand. And it's hard to defend a lawsuit for less than 10 grand.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Over a $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000 dispute. Right. Can't tell you how many unpaid overtime claims I've settled for less than $5,000 after the client has had to pay me 20 grand to defend it. And it could have been avoided really simply, really early.
And the other thing that you're not mentioning there is besides the financial cost is the time and the distraction.
the stress that it puts a business through, especially a small business owner through, to have to go through it, and the animosity that develops. It's never nice when it's a former employee, right? Usually something happened to make the employee former, but still everybody goes on their merry way. But the attention that's diverted from the main goal of the business, you can't put a price tag on that.
Right.
And I would say that, I know we talked about a bunch of these issues, and not to belabor the point, but there are even more complex issues today that companies have to deal with, right? Yeah. Numerous states, different laws, all of this stuff, vaccine issues, health issues, like all of that.
They're just mushrooming.
Yeah. And I can't see it changing. I mean, and then there's obviously, we didn't even talk about security and all the protocols and all that stuff, right? And keeping information secret and private.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You are, I think you and lawyers like you who are employer side, I want to talk about that a little. Employer side, labor, employee. You're kind of like a one-time insurance policy. Not one time, but an insurance policy of some.
It's the old ounce of prevention adage.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's the adage again?
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And just to clarify my prior comment, you are employer side. Is that right?
Predominantly employer side. I won't sue employers. I'll talk to an employee. I'll help them into or out of a contract if necessary.
Right.
But I won't go full on adverse to an employer.
And employment law is one of those unique practice areas where lawyers tend to be one side or the other.
Most do. Yeah. There are a few, especially the smaller firms, that play both sides of it.
And why are you employer side? Why wouldn't you sue employers?
Well, I
know the answer, but
yeah, you might not know the answer. Frankly, I most of the claims that I get, I would have to turn away. And then when I worked for a smaller firm, I thought about it. And I talk to a lot of people, and I'll talk to anybody. It's a friends and family kind of thing. And I have good relationships with employee side attorneys, so I'll make good referrals. But most of the people who came to me just didn't have decent cases, and they thought they were entitled to a payday when the employer had done nothing wrong. And that's just not the type of case that I would ever be interested in bringing or even negotiating for.
Right. But even if it is a good case, you're still going to refer it out.
I am. And why? Because I work for a firm that is based on an hourly fee model, not a contingent fee model.
Right.
And the average employee and even executive can't sustain litigation on an hourly basis.
Right. But is there also just the idea of, as an employer, that my lawyer is giving me advice, but also suing, companies like mine?
Actually, I would disagree with that. Okay? No, because many of my clients like the idea that I can see both sides of it.
Yeah.
And I've gotten I did get a lot of positive feedback when I toyed with the idea of being a both sides kind of guy.
As long as you didn't sue them, that's fine.
Exactly.
Well, and sometimes, you get...
But we have conflict checks.
You have to make some arguments in one case, and then it comes back to, haunt you in the next case, right?
That's
so you have to be careful of that too. Yeah.
And I saw that happen more in commercial litigation. Too.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
So I think there's only one issue left that we should probably raise.
Go ahead, please.
Porpoise. No, you please feel free.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Your
what
name
it
is Porpoise.
I knew that was coming.
Well, yeah. We can't let you go.
Yeah.
So how did you get the name Porpoise?
You want the true story, right?
Well, yeah.
Yes.
But then I also want to know the untrue story.
No,
I really want to know both.
The true story.
I want to know both.
Well, my first initial is D. Right. And that stands for dolphin. And I just thought that sounded too silly. So I decided to go with Porpoise, just kind of my street name years ago. And also when I was moving to Miami, I was like, people are going to think I'm a Dolphins fan. I grew up a Bears fan. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay. So that's the untrue story.
You got me.
Okay.
Tell us the true one.
Tell us the true story.
All right. So
we had a good pregnant pause there for a minute to let the listener think that was the real story.
I was a swimmer. That really was my identity.
What was your discipline?
My event.
Your event. Sorry.
50-meter freestyle.
Okay.
Not to be confused with 50-yard freestyle where you have to do a turn.
Yep.
Because you see I have these bottle caps.
Glasses.
I couldn't do a good turn. No matter, I swam however many years, 20 years.
Are you
So you were a
crashing into?
speedster.
So
Are you just
one length
crashing
of the
into the
pool.
wall
Yeah,
there?
when he hits the wall, he stops.
Yeah, you
right.
know, I'd bang my feet. I'd miss the wall and I'd not be close enough. You know,
Right.
I couldn't hit a good turn in a big race. So it was a long course, 50 meter.
Okay.
And I had a girlfriend who saw me swimming the butterfly, not the freestyle. And she said, you know, you look like a porpoise. I'm going to call you Porpoise. And a couple girlfriends later, it stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to get it legalized because my credit card said Porpoise Evans and my checks, back when we used checks, they said something different.
Right. You know, what's the diff? Something different.
Yeah, we have a trade secret issue here.
Oh, see,
I am D. Porpoise Evans, and we are not revealing anything more than the D.
Is there who knows besides obviously your family?
Yeah. You know, a fair number of people know. Payroll knows.
Oh, well, okay.
Payroll. All right.
Yeah.
Who do you use again? We're going to call them.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a great story, and I'm really
Yeah.
happy to hear you on the air, recorded for posterity, committing to come join my swim group on a Sunday, maybe this Sunday when it'll be 40.
You have my
50
commitment
degrees.
as soon as I don't need a wetsuit to get in the water.
Yeah.
Well,
I
won't
moved
be
to
this
Miami
week.
not to swim in this kind of water.
Understood. Porpoise, this has been fun. If you have any questions for Porpoise or you want to contact him or hire him, his contact info is in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star review. If you're listening to this podcast, then you know where to find our podcast, but please share it with your friends and family, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Porpoise.
Hey, thanks for having
Nelson.
me.
Thank you, Nelson.
For more information on this show and other resources, visit bastamron.com and connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram @BastAmron.